Hi guys, welcome to part 3 where I'm going to be ranking all of the historical fiction and fantasy TV series that I watched in 2022. So guys, welcome back to this ranking where I'm talking about all the historical fiction fantasy I watched in 2022. Yeah, this is part 1. This is the top 10, you guys. And let me tell you, I had an incredibly difficult time get in this top 10. There were some shows that made it in, but then I had to kind of backtrack out of it the last minute. Much of the top 10 can easily be rearranged, you guys. Like I said, I had an incredibly difficult time with this top 10. I kept going back and forth with certain shows, and I was like, oh god, I don't know what to do. So, you guys, let's get going, and here is a replay of the rules of this ranking. First up, the show obviously has to be either a historical fiction show or a fantasy TV series. I decided to group fantasy in with this because sometimes fantasy has that historical fiction aesthetic that looks quite nice. Next up, the show has to have been set pre-2000s. If the show took place post-2000s, it was not included on this list. So that would include something like The Staircase. Unfortunately, that did not make the cut for this list because The Staircase technically took place in 2001. Next up, the shows that needed to make this list needed to have concluded their series before I got these videos up. So for instance, something like Willow was able to make the list because it concluded right before I got this list done. But something like the Winchesters or Walker Independence, those only got halfway through their seasons, so that is why they are not on this list. Next up, these rankings, these are solely based on just my personal enjoyment and whatever entertainment I got. In some ways, the ranking is a bit arbitrary, and the ranking could fluctuate if my mood just depended on it. So these rankings are solely based off of whatever personal enjoyment entertainment I got from them. Next up, everything that is on this list either was released in the year of 2022, or if it was something that I watched for the very first time, but it was released in a prior year, it still made this list. But there is nothing on this ranking that is a rewatch. For instance, I had a rewatch of Leonardo this year, but that technically aired last year, so that made my list for last year. Once again, no rewatches. At number 10, Detective Anna, Season 2. It's 1894, and Anna Moronova has lost the gift of communicating with spirits. She tries to live a normal life, but a new evil descends on the city. In the meantime, Yakov Stolman returns after his mysterious disappearance 5 years ago, creating tension in his reunion with Anna. Starring Alexandra Nikiforovna and Dmitry Fried. Detective Anna Season 2, you guys. This is probably a really random, no one has ever even seen the show. This is an addition on this list and whatnot. I recently discovered this show last year, and no, well, not last year, but in the year of 2021. Detective Anna is a Russian TV show. It is entirely straight up in Russian, down around Russian production and whatnot, Russian actors, Russian crew. I discovered the show back in 2021. I watched all of season 1. I did not get around to season 2 until obviously the year of 2022. I loved this second season. Dear freaking God, I was obsessed with this second season. I wish more people would discover Detective Anna. It is entirely, both seasons are entirely on Amazon. You can just buy the whole seasons and whatnot. I just absolutely recommend Detective Anna. It's such a fun show. It seems like it'd be a really dark show and whatnot, but it's brilliant. It's just such wonderful characters, and the stories are just so freaking compelling and whatnot. And yeah, somehow, even though there's a massive amount of episodes per any season, the first season I think had like 56 episodes, and then this season had like 30 some episodes. They always have managed to have a large overarching theme or story that's going on that they managed to kind of connect in some way every several episodes or whatever. Yeah, season 2, it pretty much is taking place 5 years after the events of season 1. Anna has somehow kind of lost her ability to communicate with the dead. Her love interest, Inspector Stillman, has kind of gone missing, but he comes back into her life here 5 years later. But he's hiding some deep, dark secrets about where he's been for the past 5 years. Yeah, those reveals get introduced in interesting, angsty ways, and their relationship is put to the ultimate test like halfway through the show. Yeah, I love the season. I love the big, overarching story going on that was dealing with like some hypnosis, some crazy character who's like hypnotizing people. He has an agenda that he's up to and whatnot. I can't really get into a lot of it because it'd be really spoiler if I try to get into it. But yeah, it has a lot to do with like hypnosis, and a lot more magical elements kind of start getting put into play and whatnot. And yeah, Anna is still continuing on her quest to speak to the dead. Because obviously she's going to get it back at some point. She's lost it in the span of 5 years, but she does manage to get her ability to communicate with the dead back early on in the show, obviously, because that's kind of the crux and the point of the show, is her being able to communicate with the dead, and then in turn communicating with the local police force, to help them solve crimes and whatnot. But yeah, please, for the love of God, please watch this show. Like I said, both seasons are on Amazon for a pretty good price, I think. And it's so fun, so great. I love it. At number 9, Our Flag Means Death. The year is 1717. Wealthy landowner Stede Bonnet has a midlife crisis and decides to become a pirate. It does not go well. Starring Rhys Darby and Taika Waititi. First up, that plot synopsis that I just read you guys, that straight up comes from IMDb, the summary that they use. That's probably my favorite plot synopsis of the year. Ending with, it does not go well. That just sums up this entire show great. It does not go well. Trying to become a pirate. Our Flag Means Death was a absolute pleasant surprise, you guys. As much as I love historical fiction shows, this show was still being stated as being like a comedy show, and it's definitely a comedy show because the episodes are like only 30 minutes and whatnot. I do have a rough time with comedy in general, because comedy, it's very subjective. Comedy, it's hit or miss with people. So I wasn't quite sure how this show was going to work for me, if the comedy was going to work. I did have a bit of a rough patch with like maybe the first 3 episodes. The comedy was very hit or miss in those first 3 episodes, and I think the show was struggling to kind of find its footing and what type of show it wanted to be. But after those first 3 episodes, that's where the show really picked up, and I think it kind of realized, okay, this is what this show is and what it's about. And I absolutely just was pleasantly surprised with the direction of this show, because I was not expecting it to be a gay love story, you guys, between the character of Stede Bonnet and Taika Waititi's character, where he is playing Blackbeard. This show is definitely a gay romance comedy, and it was utterly freaking brilliant and fantastic, and I loved it to death. Yeah, Rhys Darby and Taika Waititi, they are the absolute standouts of this show. They are the reason why you watch this. Their relationship, their character development, it's all why you watch this show. A genuinely hilarious show. Like I said, once you get past those first 3 episodes, it is a genuinely hilarious show that's rather hard, that really tugs at your heartstrings, and rather emotional in places, and it just works. It just works wonderfully, and it's about a bunch of misfits at the end of the day. The show is about a bunch of misfits, because it's not just Blackbeard and the character of Stede Bonnet. It's not just their story as being misfits. It's also the crew. The crew is also really highly dysfunctional, and they're all misfits too. It's just a story of a group of characters that have kind of just been ousted from society for whatever reason, and their only option and choice in life is to become pirates. I mean, that was kind of the big thing to do during this time period. You had no other choice but to maybe be a pirate, unfortunately. So yeah, I really like this show. It takes pirating and piracy to a whole new level. I loved it, and I cannot wait for season 2. At number 8, Vikings Valhalla. Follow-up series to Vikings, set 100 years afterward, and centers on the adventures of Leif Erikson. Starring Sam Cortlett, Leo Suter, and Frida Gustafsson. You guys, one of my all-time favorite shows, easily within like my top 10 favorite shows of all time, was the History Channel show Vikings. I was so excited to see that Netflix had this spin-off show, Vikings Valhalla. I was very anxious about it. I wasn't sure, was it going to stand up to the original Vikings TV show? Fortunately, Vikings Valhalla is definitely a worthy successor to Vikings. Just in terms of tone and atmosphere and mood, and just, I mean, even just the overall look of the show. It really perfectly matches up to the original Vikings TV show, I think. And it definitely had a lot of that great tension and drama, great action sequences and battle sequences, sword fighting or whatever. Just a really lot of great, intense, dramatic moments that totally worked. And it did. It gave me those feelings when I was watching the original Viking show and whatnot. And like I said, the show is set like 100 years after that original show, so you have a whole set of characters. But they make a lot of references to characters from the previous show who are now obviously long dead and gone. But the show is definitely playing with this whole thing of legacy, history and legacy that continues. You want your name to be remembered through the centuries and whatnot, whether for good or bad. Sometimes it's going to work out for you, sometimes it's not. You might become the villain of history. But yeah, this show was great. And a stunning show, you guys. It looked amazing. I loved the costuming, hair, makeup. The overall story was great. I can't wait to see more of these characters' journey. We're about to get into season 2, you guys. It should be great. At number 7, Interview with the Vampire. Follows Louis de Pointe-de-Loc's epic story of love, blood, and the perils of immortality as a vampire. Starring Jacob Anderson, Sam Reed, and Bailey Bass. Interview with the Vampire was probably the show that I was most anxious about because I love the original book by Anne Rice, and I absolutely love that movie with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst, you guys. I love that movie. So I definitely went into this TV adaptation with a bit of trepidation, if you will, and concern. This ended up being very surprising. A lot of the changes that this show did, I initially had my concerns about when I found out about the changes, but then the changes, once I started watching the show, they worked for me, which was great. It changed the time period, it changed the age of Claudia, it changed the race of Louis and whatnot. All of that worked for me, and I really liked what it had to say about a lot of stuff. Using vampirism, if you will, as kind of a large metaphor to kind of talk about issues like race and gender and stuff like that, and sexuality, the show, ultimately, great. I liked what it did to Anne Rice's original book. It fleshed some things out, because the movie only had so much time to do certain things. So yeah, the show was able to kind of really delve into some of that stuff and get into a lot of the character issues. The relationship between Jacob Anderson's Louis and Sam Reed's Lestat, just definitely the pivotal thing of this show. Their relationship, you have to get into it, you have to love it, you have to hate it. The show kind of treats their relationship as kind of this point of domestic abuse and domestic violence, if you will, which is an interesting approach that I kind of liked at the end of the day. Jacob Anderson, he truly shines as the character of Louis. I love his quiet nuance with the character against Sam Reed's Lestat, who is really flamboyant and outspoken and wild and crazy, he's like a wild and crazy vampire. So I really loved the dynamic between Louis and Lestat and the individual portrayals of the relationship and whatnot. And definitely cannot wait for season 2, you guys. At number 6, Bridgerton, season 2. Anthony Bridgerton begins his search for a wife, clashing with outspoken newcomer Kate Sharma. Starring Jonathan Bailey and Simone Ashley. I highly enjoyed season 2 of Bridgerton, you guys. I wasn't sure how it was going to go because I loved season 1 so much. So I wasn't quite sure how season 2 is going to go because, we were kind of getting a shift in cast in a sense. We were focusing on 2 entirely different characters compared to the first season. So I wasn't sure how that was going to go. Season 2 was definitely a fantastic follow-up to season 1. Everything that you loved about season 1 came back here in this second season. You still get all that great diversity. You get that same great story. You get that same great comedy and humor, that same great emotional stuff. You get all that same great sexual tension. So wonderful, so well done. I love the character of Anthony Bridgerton, and I really thoroughly enjoyed the character of Kate Sharma, played by Simone Ashley. Simone Ashley was definitely a big highlight of this season. Anthony and Kate, They're definitely arguing and bickering the whole damn season. It's kind of part of the love that you enjoy about the show, is kind of seeing that back and forth between them, because you know they got to make it work. You know they got to make it work between them. Yeah, all that sexual tension and drama, so spot on, so great. I loved it. At number 5, Stranger Things Season 4. Still reeling from the events of last year, the gang tries to move on with their lives. However, a new threat is brewing both on Earth and the Upside Down. Starring Millie Bobby Brown, Winona Ryder, and David Harbour. How does this show keep getting better and better and better? I don't understand. um, when I first saw kind of the runtime, the episode runtimes for this season, I was a little concerned because this season had some extremely long episode runtimes, kind of going past an hour, and I think there's even an episode that's like an hour and a half, you know? So when I first saw the episode runtimes, I was like, oh dear God, this could be a bad thing. It could make the show feel really plodding and slow. But I personally never felt that way. I think the episode runtimes actually benefited this show. You got to spend a lengthy amount of time with these characters and really kind of get into some of the deeper drama and personal issues kind of going on between characters and between relationships and whatnot. Season 4 was outstanding, you guys. Just an incredible season of television in general. Yeah, these kids, all these kids, they're growing up, they're maturing, their lives are kind of going in different directions, and they have certain types of interests and different responsibilities, you know. Such a dramatic season. Oh my God. Probably the best song of the year was "Running Up That Hill" by Kate Bush. You know, that because that song came back out in the 80s. You know, that because the show takes place in the 80s, obviously. That song is a rather old song, and I loved kind of the hit reemergence of "Running Up That Hill" because it's such an amazing song anyway. And I loved how the show used "Running Up That Hill." Just absolutely perfect how that song was used. And the song was played a lot, and you would think it would get just too repetitive and rather annoying, but it never did. Every time the song came on, it just absolutely worked brilliantly. The MVP of this particular season was definitely the character of Eddie, played by Joseph Quinn. I loved him. Dear God, I love that character. And yeah, I am super ready for the final season. You guys, it should be great. At number 4, Peaky Blinders, Season 6. Tommy gets involved in a power game with fascists, freedom fighters, and Boston gangsters as he deals with the consequences of his past actions. Starring Cillian Murphy, Sophie Rundle, and Paul Anderson. Dear God, Peaky Blinders is perhaps one of the best British televisions ever. You guys, let's be real. Peaky Blinders is an incredibly outstanding, just masterpiece of a show. Dear God. And yeah, all thanks to Cillian Murphy's performance, you guys. This whole show really hinges on Cillian Murphy's performance. Yeah, just such wonderful acting, directing, writing for this show. I do think this season, I wouldn't say it's like one of my favorite seasons of the show, but it's still an amazing, incredible season of a show. It had to kind of deal with the tragic death of Helen McRory. Helen McRory died before this season was even made, so the show kind of had that bit of an obstacle, like what do we do with her character in this show? They had to kind of work around that in some interesting ways, which worked. Yeah, this final season, whoo, Cillian Murphy's character, Thomas Shelby. Thomas Shelby, he's one of those characters that's like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? I mean, obviously we think of him as the good guy, but he's a very incredibly flawed man with, you know, his strengths and his weaknesses, and a lot of his past actions from previous seasons are finally really kind of coming up and chasing after him, and he has to deal with a lot of those consequences, and it makes for a pretty remarkable, intense season of television with some really great twists and turns that happen, and some, you know, characters getting their comeuppance in certain places. Yeah, just I love this show. Peaky Blinders is amazing, you guys, and we do have a movie coming. Even though the show has ended, we do have a movie coming out on Netflix, which I'm looking forward to. I'm kind of curious what the movie is going to do. I mean, I like that the show concluded. You know, I'm not sure how I feel about more, but I guess we shall see. But yeah, if you have not seen Peaky Blinders, where have you been? You're missing out in your life on Peaky Blinders. I highly recommend Peaky Blinders. At number 3, Pachinko. This sweeping saga chronicles the hopes and dreams of a Korean immigrant family across 4 generations as they leave their homeland in an indomitable quest to survive and thrive. Starring Min-ha Kim, Yoon Ya-young, and Lee Min-ho. Ooh, Pachinko. You guys, wow, this show. This is one of those shows that I don't think anybody even watched except for like a few people, and it's a shame. It doesn't help that it was like on Apple TV Plus or whatever. I just don't think many people have any interest in Apple TV Plus. There's kind of just a really small percentage of people that have Apple TV Plus and whatnot. Pachinko, wow, an incredible production. Just everything about this show: casting, directing, writing, costuming, the historical backdrop, because this is taking place kind of the early 1900s and then leading up into like the 1980s and whatnot. Yeah, really focusing on multiple generations of this Korean immigrant family, and especially during here in the early 1900s, kind of the back and forth drama between like Korea and Japan and whatnot. Um, and yeah, it's a journey of a young woman living in Korea, and she's rather young and naive, and she gets into some awful predicaments that really kind of change her life journey and whatnot. Um, it's her story as a young woman and facing the repercussions of some of her actions. Um, and yeah, this same woman, we're following her as a young woman, and then the show has a back and forth element to it, taking place like in the early 1900s, and then going to like the 1980s, where we see her as like an older elderly woman, and she has like her son and her grandson, and kind of this generational gap that is happening because she went through a certain time period and certain life events that really affected her as a young woman and as a Korean woman. And yeah, her grandson, he's become rather Americanized and westernized more than anything. And it's a story of kind of generational gaps, and kind of the elderly versus the younger generations, and history that is being lost and forgotten, and generations, becoming westernized and modernized, and forgetting the history that should be vital and important to who they are and their origins and whatnot, and that history and those origins should not be forgotten. um so I loved Pachinko, an amazing season of television just in general. It was rather intriguing that it got a second season, because I was just assuming it was going to be a one and done season, but it did get a second season. I'm kind of curious where a second season is going to go. My sister actually read the book, and she said there's a lot that the show left out, which I didn't know. So I guess that's what the second season is going to get into, is kind of the rest of the book, I suppose. But yeah, if you have not seen Pachinko, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing, incredible story of Korean immigrants and whatnot, and I wish more people had got around to watching it. As you see, it's very, very high up on my list. At one point, this was going to be my number one, you guys. At number two, The Last Kingdom. Ill omens and border raids make Uhtred extra vigilant at his northern outpost, and he'll need the help of King Edward and his former love, Ethelflaed, to fight back against the Vengeance of Brita. Starring Alexander Draymond, Millie Brady, and Emily Cox. This is the final season of The Last Kingdom, yeah, guys. But kind of like Peaky Blinders, we got a movie coming. What's up with that? Both shows have movies coming out. It's like the stories, they kind of conclude, but you get this hope, like, oh, we get to still stay in this world for at least a movie, This final season of The Last Kingdom, wow, as you can see, it made my number two. I have no words for just The Last Kingdom in general. This show, I mean, it's kind of like Peaky Blinders, just one of the most amazingly done shows ever. Everything about The Last Kingdom is so well done, from costuming, hair, makeup, writing, directing, casting, locations. Once again, kind of all the same stuff like that Peaky Blinders hits. The Last Kingdom, things have intensified. Things get really dark and dramatic in this final season. Beloved characters are going to die. Characters are going to make actions that you may or may not agree with. This is all about Uhtred's journey, and his final journey in some ways with some of these characters. And from the get-go with this show, his home, Bebbanburg, was taken from him. That was his ancestral home, his land. So this whole entire show has been building up to him trying to reclaim Bebbanburg, because it's rightfully his, and yeah, his children, this is the legacy he wants to pass on to his children. So the entire focus of this final season really is him he needs to reclaim Bebenberg, no matter what, and that's going to cause some casualties along the way, unfortunately. And yeah, it's also kind of his final confrontation with the character of Brita, a young woman who he's been with since the beginning of this show, but their lives went in tragically different, opposite directions, and she kind of became the villain of this entire show. So that really comes to a head in really dramatic, interesting ways too, with Uhtred's character and Brita's character. Yeah, just an outstanding final season, you guys. If you do not cry, I don't know what's wrong with you. I cried multiple occasions this final season. Just really emotionally satisfying, this final season, I think. Emotionally satisfying, just in general, a very satisfying conclusion to this incredible journey of Uhtred. And at number 1, House of the Dragon tells the story of an internal succession war within House Targaryen at the height of its power, 172 years before the birth of Daenerys Targaryen, starring Matt Smith, Olivia Cooke, Emma Darcy, Rhys Ifans, and Paddy Considine. Of course, House of the Dragon was going to be number 1. You guys, I think I've kind of been subtly hinting at that this entire 3-video series because of my shirt. You guys, if you can't tell, that was kind of a hint what was going to be number 1 right there. House of the Dragon, far and away my favorite show of 2022. Game of Thrones, I've said before, Game of Thrones is my all-time favorite show, just period, ever, in general. I was highly looking forward to House of the Dragon. Like everybody, I had my concerns because a lot of people had issues with those final couple seasons of Game of Thrones. I personally was fine with the last couple seasons. It didn't really bother me. But yeah, a lot of people still had concerns about this spin-off series. Rightfully so, And I think it worked. It worked wonderfully, brilliantly, marvelously. It felt like we were back in the world of Game of Thrones, the tone and look of it. This show is just completely, just so much better, compared to something like how The Witcher Blood Origin, what The Witcher Blood Origin did. If you watch this entire series, The Witcher Blood Origin made it to the way back end of the series because that was just such an inconsistent show that didn't really match up with the Witcher show. House of the Dragon, complete opposite. It matches up completely and totally with what has already been presented in the original Game of Thrones show. Everything from costuming, hair, makeup, locations, buildings, everything felt familiar, and that was nice. What's definitely the best thing about House of the Dragon is definitely this whole just civil war that we see starting to rise little by little, episode by episode, within House Targaryen. There's a lot of family drama. It's a show about this highly dysfunctional family that Daenerys Targaryen eventually comes from, how this family is just really kind of thriving and dying within King's Landing and whatnot, and things that are kind of changing around them. I loved seeing this much more intimate, domestic look at House Targaryen, because you're not flying all over the map. You're not flying all over the map. You're pretty much primarily just solely in King's Landing on this show. Like I said, a much more intimate domestic look at this family and kind of giving you this backdrop in history to House Targaryen that I think helps explain a lot about Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones, It's nice to kind of see where she comes from, the type of family she comes from, and yes, seeing House Targaryen at the height of its powers, essentially, and all this wealth it has, and power, and the sheer amount of dragons. You guys, I love seeing all these dragons, and boy, oh boy, do these dragons look stunning. Oh my god. I mean, the Game of Thrones dragons were already stunning as it was, and I just thought the show would kind of take the same model, but no, they went a step above and really enhanced the dragons on this show, which is absolutely incredible, and I can't believe that they did it. Yeah, House of the Dragon, far and away one of my top favorite shows of the year. I was just so obsessed with it, just watching all sorts of breakdown videos from YouTube channels and reading all sorts of reviews and watching fan videos, and I just got so immersed into it, and that's how I kind of think of a show that I enjoy, how immersed I get into it, that once I'm done with it, I do more beyond it, whether that's watching fan videos or reading fan fiction or watching YouTube videos or reviews or reading reviews, other shows, as much as I may enjoy things like that, I may not sit and go kind of beyond watching the show, so House of the Dragon, that's why it definitely makes Number one, because of how obsessive and into it I got, because I just went beyond what I was already given and whatnot. So yeah, season 2, I need it. It's probably going to be another over a year, you guys. I don't think we're getting another season until 2024, unfortunately, but I am ready for it. So you guys, that is it for my 3-part series ranking all of the historical fiction and fantasy TV series I watched in the year of 2022. If you made it through all these videos, thank you very much. I know they are very long and lengthy. Sometimes I feel like I'm just sitting here rambling away, but if you made it through, thank you so much. I really greatly appreciate it. Once again, let me know if you watched any of these shows that were on this entire series, whether you loved them, hated them, and what would kind of be your personal rankings. What would be your favorite historical or fantasy show that you watched last year? Just let me know, because, you know, we all have different opinions about things. We all have very different interests, and I always find that so intriguing and fascinating. What appeals to people, you know? So yeah, whatever your opinions are, what are your personal favorites, I definitely would love to hear what they are. So yeah, that's it, you guys. Once again, thank you so much for watching this series, because I know they're long. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you like this video, you may like these other videos. Bye, guys.